You're listening to Nightlight Radio Network. This is Dr. Bob Hieronimus, co-host of 21st Century Radio. We are happy to present this rebroadcast of our show on Nightlight. In the nearly 30 years since 21st Century Radio was born, we have had scores of guests reviewing UFO research, and although there are many who have contributed to this field of research, there are about 7 guests whose works I highly recommend. And tonight's guest, Dr. David Jacobs, is amongst those 7. The others were Bud Hopkins, Dr. John Mack, who are no longer with us, as well as my dear friend Ingo Swan, who I miss greatly. We used to smoke the biggest and longest cigars on the planet, good old Ingo and I, and Peter Robbins, Stanton Friedman, and Dr. Jacques Vallée. Those are the top 7 as far as I am concerned. Now, this is Dr. Jacobs' 10th appearance on 21st Century Radio. The first, he first joined us in 1993 and was last with us in the year 2000. David M. Jacobs is an American historian and recently retired associate professor of history at Temple University, specializing in 20th century American history and culture. Jacobs is also well known in the field of ufology for his research and authoring of books on the subject of alien abductions. You can visit David at www.ufoabduction.com. Well, tonight we will discuss his latest and most important book, Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, published by Disinformation Books. Now, I've been waiting a long time for what might be the most important publication on UFOs, period. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio after 15 years of disappearing there, Dr. Jacobs.
Oh, thank you, Bob. It seems like yesterday, though.
Well, it was just yesterday. It's a matter of how you think, I guess, huh? Well, David, this is, I think, your most important work. I think it's going to be perhaps one of your most controversial. But I'm telling you, I think you have really gotten to the core of this particular situation. And we'll get to that in just a little while. How do you feel about this book?
Well, I think you're right. I think this is about as far as I can go now in the abduction phenomenon. It's very difficult to get any more information from what I could tell. And it is controversial, and it's got a lot of transcripts in it that some people have complained about a little bit. But the transcripts are revealing about exactly what is happening and how it's happening. And I have 2 more books to write. One is How to Do Hypnosis with Abductees, and the other one is about the adventures I had with a single abductee and her sort of hybrid people around her. Mm-hmm. And that will be it for me. I'm hanging up my brains after that. I'm going to just do nothing but watch television.
Well, there might not be anything else to do but watch television.
Yep. I'm doing quite a lot of it these days right now.
Well, how long have you been involved in studying UFOs and abductions? Would you give us the names of your books, please?
Well, I've been involved with studying UFOs and abductions for about 50 years. 50
years?
Yeah, I started in about 65 or so. It's a little bit hazy. I think I started late 65 or early 66. I can't remember, to tell you the truth. And I wound up writing my doctoral dissertation on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America, and I got my PhD in 1973. Then in 1992, I came out with a book called Secret Life, which kind of talked about a sort of standardized procedures that abductees go through on typical abduction events. And then in 1998, I came out with The Threat, which was a book which focused more on hybrids and the phenomenon of different kinds of hybrids and what they were up to. And then in the year 2000, I published an edited book where I had 10 authors, including Bud Hopkins and John Mack, and Ron Westrom and Don Dondery and Jerry Clark and other sort of heavyweights in the field contribute original articles, and I contributed a couple of chapters there too, and then came the dry spell until now, but I started doing this kind of research. What's in this book began to develop for me starting in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually took me quite a while to get the darn thing published, believe it or not. It took years to get it published.
You mean to find a publisher?
To find a publisher, exactly right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that was?
Well, there's actually a specific reason that we can all point to. In 1998, when I went on a book tour, my two books on abductions were published by Simon & Schuster. And with Secret Life, I went on a book tour around the country. Everything was good. Everything was wonderful. And they called me a best-selling author then, see. In the threat, which they wanted another book, and I wrote the threat. And then they put me on a book tour. Everything was nice. Everything was great. Everything was wonderful for the first week. Then the Monica Lewinsky story broke.
Uh-oh. Well, you can't compete with that.
No, I was canceled on virtually every show I was supposed to be on in every city, and that was the end of that book.
Oh,
it's still selling, but when Simon & Schuster took a look at at this book, it was the first place we went to, of course, some years back, they looked at the numbers. They didn't do well. The threat didn't do well, and so it was all a matter of money, and they drew a buy on it. Then we couldn't get interested for any other publishers, and finally, Red Wheel Weiser, who owns Hampton Roads and Canary and a bunch of other imprints, took it on, and to my eternal gratitude, and so now it's out.
Well, I am so glad it is out, and it's a tough book for me to read, I'll tell you, and it might be pretty tough for others as well. I had a very similar experience in the sense of the book that took me 30 years to write. It was called Inside the Yellow Submarine, and everyone wanted a Beatles book, but nobody wanted to publish something that the Beatles did not want published, and that's a subject that the Beatles did not want published because it revealed that they had very little to do with the film. And so, needless to say, over 12 other authors attempted to do it. The Beatles wouldn't let them do it. And we had quite a struggle, but they finally decided, okay, go do it. But to find a publisher was, whoa, boy, almost impossible. And yet the Beatles always have been very popular.
Oh, still are.
You noticed that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but wasn't there just a film made about the making of the Yellow Submarine?
Well, not on the making of it, but of the Yellow Submarine, and it did. As a matter of fact, there are DVDs that actually add that information. A lot of it from our books. The Beatles borrowed that information. That discussed how it came about and that kind of thing. But I was just amazed at how long it took to find someone that had the courage. And so we had to have two of my attorneys go up against all of the Beatles attorneys. And we won.
Wow.
I'll never
Fantastic.
I didn't expect that at all. It was not, but fortunately it is out. And now it's considered to be the most important book ever written on the Yellow Submarine. Mainly because we interviewed just about everybody, with the exception of the Beatles, who would not become involved, that created the film, over 50 people. And now, since most of them are now passed on, that's the sad thing about history, as you well know, when some of your greater sources pass on, then that kind of field kind of dries up. But I'm sorry to get into this area, but it does take a long time sometimes to get good books published. How did you get involved with the abduction phenomenon?
Well, actually, there is an overlap here with what you were just saying, because when significant figures pass on in the world, usually there's been people who have interviewed them, and it becomes oral history, and that oral history then it becomes sort of an important document, if you will, for their lives and for their careers and so forth. And with doing abduction research, really is oral history. Everything is basically history. Obviously, the beginning of the sentence that I'm talking now is floating away into history. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to define when history begins. My guess is it begins now, whenever now is. And so with abductions, it's oral history. But it's oral history with a twist, with a problem. In normal oral history, people try to make themselves look pretty good, oftentimes. You have to be very careful with oral history of major figures. Of figures who are minor figures, it doesn't matter that much. But they try to pump themselves up and see how important they were and all the rest of that stuff. With the abduction phenomenon, people are oftentimes fearful of remembering what what happened to them. They leave stuff out because it's too embarrassing for them. They get things wrong. There's confabulation. It becomes a kind of tangled mess in the beginning if you don't know what you're doing, which was what happened to me when I first started out doing hypnosis with abductees back in 1986. I made every mistake a human being could make, but I learned from my mistakes very, very quickly. And so the material that I've had now, I'm fairly confident in, obviously, many years later. And so I had enough material, I thought, to make this book starting some years back. But one has to remember for your audience that this is human memory recovered through hypnosis of all the damn things, administered by amateurs. And I will guarantee you, everybody's an amateur in this business. I don't care if you're a professional hypnotist or not, or a psychologist or psychiatrist. You're all amateurs when it comes to the abduction hypnosis world. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm confident of the data. I'm confident of what I've written, and there's enough controls in place to make me not embarrassed later on, or anything like that. So what would you like to know, Dr. Bob?
How many abductees have you worked with?
Well, I have worked with 150 people. Now, that doesn't seem all that long, and you have to understand that there's a problem with that number. It's a wrong number. Yes, I have worked with 150 people, but a bunch of those people I only had one session with. And they just told me whatever account that they had, and that was it. And then they never came back. I don't charge for anything I do, and people can come as many times as they want. They can leave whenever they want.
Wow.
There's a significant number, maybe 20%, something like that. 25% had only one session, then a bunch had two sessions, and then a bunch had four sessions. And there's more and more and more. To one woman who I had 100 sessions.
Holy heavens! Was that Betsy or?
Yes.
That was Betsy. Boy, I'm telling you, well, excuse me, I won't jump ahead there, but really fascinating stuff. Really, really. Well, obviously, there must have been some things that these abductees had in common. Were there?
Well, all abductees have the same things in common. They were all abducted starting in childhood, perhaps even infancy, although they don't remember that, of course. And the abductions have continued, sometimes slower, sometimes with a greater rate, all the way until the present day. Mm-hmm. And they remember a few. They remember abduction events once you open up the gates in hypnosis, now they remembered things happening anyway because they've come to me. Most abductees, maybe 95%, I'm guessing here, but maybe 90 to 95%, do not remember anything. They have no bleed-through memories, no screen memories, no nothing. It is completely submerged in them somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, we only see the ones who have these bleed-through memories, who've worried about odd events that have happened to them over the years, and then they come to me or to other researchers. And so we deal with a very small, tiny percentage of people who've had abduction events. And with the fact of it being human memory, with hypnosis conducted oftentimes by amateurs such as me, it's very hard to imagine a weaker form of evidence. So you got to keep that in mind. But it is evidence, number one, and there is a physicality to the abduction phenomenon that is extremely important. People see other people abducted and are not abducted. When people are abducted, they are physically missing from their normal environments. There's only been one case, and that was a highly dubious case in 1972 in Australia, where a woman claimed to be abducted, and a researcher was sitting in the car with her. At the time, she said she was being abducted, and she wasn't abducted. So the question is, was she actually an abductee or what? But that's the only time in the thousands of cases that we've looked at that anything like that has ever happened. Therefore, it's an outlier. Therefore, it doesn't mean anything. But the fact is that people can confirm each other's abductions if they're abducted in groups. People sometimes meet other people on a street or in some odd way, just a serendipity, and recognize each other from being on a UFO together. Of all the things that ever come up in conversation, you think that would be the last. And people come back with unusual marks and scars on their body, and sometimes fully formed scar tissue that was not there the day before. I have seen this to my unbelievable amazement. And people have come back with their clothes on backwards, missing certain items that they had on when they were abducted, their watch, their ring, whatever it is, and sometimes wearing somebody else's clothes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you say, sometimes they're even deposited in the wrong place. So in other words, during the abduction experience, the aliens can make some mistakes.
They are living, sentient beings, and not everything works perfectly 100% of the time. They screw up just like anybody else, but the number of screw-ups is relatively low.
Well, with that, we're going to do there's a screw-up we cannot afford, and that is not paying attention to commercials and stuff like that. So time out on the playing field, and when you come back, I want you to study up on this subject. How do people become abductees? You can cheat if you want. You can read from your book, okay? I'm sure that after decades of doing this, you can't remember everything. All right.
I'll try to remember that.
Okay. Well, our guest is Dr. David Jacobs, Ph.D., Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books in 2015, UFOabduction.com. Check our growing YouTube channel on selected shows at youtube.com, 21st Century Radio. Meanwhile, all previous interviews for several years are available for free at 21stcenturyradio.com.
This is Dr. Jacques Vallée. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus, the reference in the study of the paranormal.
It's nothing like being a reference. A reference for something. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guest, Dr. David Jacobs. Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books, 2015, UFOabduction.com. And you can check our growing YouTube channel with all kinds of shows up there. But I wish we could post the shows we did 20-some years ago. Someday we'll get to that, because many of those researchers, really important ones in various fields, have now passed on, and unfortunately, other shows like this never bothered with them for some strange reason. Now, have you brushed up on this next question, sir?
Well, I'll try.
Oh, well, you only get one chance now. You get one chance. Okay, here goes. Here's the question. How do people become abductees?
By sending me an envelope full of money.
How much do they got to send you?
More than enough.
Would $500 do it?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's a good deal. That's a good deal to be abducted for $500. But of course, when we get to talk about what goes on there, not too many people necessarily want to be that way. Okay.
Well, actually, the interesting thing is that since I never charged any money for anything I ever did, I consider this to be a cash flow. How do I put it? It's a negative cash flow business. That's what it is. The money just flows out of my bank account every time somebody walks into my my office.
Well, I'm sure you're happy about that.
When money changes hands in this area, expectations go up. Bad things happen. It's best just to do it gratis. You know what I mean? You're helping people to. You're changing people's lives for the better usually if they stick with you and you know what you're doing, and that should be one of the main areas that you're interested in. But people actually become abductees because their mother or their father or both were abductees, and they were abductees for the same reason, and we can therefore date it back to with a degree of certainty back to the perhaps, I'm guessing here, the last quarter of the 19th century. Maybe commensurate with the mystery airship wave of 1896, 1897. But I'm extending myself there, and there's no real evidence of that. But I once read a letter written to Jim and Coral Lorenzen, who were the directors of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which became defunct in the 1980s. And the letter was a letter from an elderly guy who said that he wanted to write them about an experience he had in the year 1917 when he was 11 years old. And he said that his parents had taken him to his grandparents' house one Sunday afternoon or whatever it was, and he went out in the backyard to fool around. And he got bored, and there was a stand of trees in this farm area. And he went around over there, and he immediately saw a large circular object that looked metallic on the ground, and which sort of astonished him. And then he noticed that there was three, I think he said, I have to remember back, little people, small people staring at him. So he turned around and he ran, and they ran after him, and he ran all the way back to his grandmother's house or grandfather's house, and he beat them there, and everything was okay. Now, having looked at 1,150 different abduction experiences with those 150 people, I can tell you right off that small aliens do not chase people, except down a hallway and on a UFO, but not in their farmland or whatever it is. The area is under control. The person is under control. What the guy was actually saying was that he was taken into the object. He doesn't remember anything like that happening. All he remembers is seeing it. He was let go, and then he came to and he ran. And he thought they were running after him, but they weren't. They'd already left. That's my analysis of this kind of a story. Having heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of stories, that was an abduction event almost certainly in 1917. Now, Bud Hopkins did a regression with a guy who was much younger in the 1920s. I did regression events with a couple of people who were children, of course, in the 1930s. And we've done many abduction regressions that for events that happened in the 1940s. So it dates back not back to the ancient times, I'm afraid. We see no evidence for that whatsoever. But it certainly dates back throughout most of the 20th century. So, and therefore, it's sort of because it's there's a situation here as well in terms of who gets to be an abductee, and that is if the child of an abductee, who is an abductee himself, grows up and gets married to a non-abductee, and most people are not abductees, of course, and has a couple of kids, those kids will be abductees as well. Mm-hmm. When they get married and have kids, their kids will be abductees. Now that has a significant meaning for the structure of the abduction phenomenon as it is. In other words, in the first area, the number of abductees keeps pace with the population growth. But at the same time, abductees are, in an odd way, workers within a complex system that I outline in the book of making hybrids. And therefore, the workforce that is required by these beings who are here is also increased as the population increases.
So it's family connection.
It's family connection. It's got to be direct family connection, but people have sisters and brothers, and they become aunts and uncles to the kid, and the kid is an abductee, and he grows up, and it's family. It's familial. It's not what you would expect. It's not a there's one, get 'em kind of situation where you just see somebody walking along and say, well, let's abduct that guy. It's not that. There's something about abductees that is just a tiny bit different than non-abductees, which allows them to be abducted.
What do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how they've made this happen. It's above my pay grade, so to speak. I don't know that much about neurology, which I think is the main reason, and I certainly don't know much about genetics. But my guess is that somewhere in the genetics of people who've had abduction experiences is some little gene that's been twisted a little or turned around or substituted or whatever it is, which allow them to be abductees. And also, I think, I may be wrong about this, but to also share in telepathy when they are abducted, because on board the UFO, when there's an abduction, virtually all communication between gray aliens and other aliens and even hybrids is telepathic. Telepathy is not a normal aspect of human life. As I've said before, my guess is, and we will never know this, we don't know this, but if only 1% of the population of the Earth or of America had genuine telepathic abilities, only 1% could tell what other people were thinking, we would probably live in a completely different society.
Oh, yes.
The ramifications of that are mind-boggling. Everything would be different, it seems to me.
In what ways would it be different, David? Because this is where we're moving now is extremely important, especially for some of your conclusions that you come to near the end of your book. But would you expand on that?
Well, I can't expand on it in terms of people just at random, but what I can expand on is the aliens. The thing is that most people, when they think about the abduction phenomenon, they think of gray aliens. gray aliens are just workers. They don't have a major say in things. They're not policymakers. They're not overseers necessarily. The ones who are in charge, I think, are the insect aliens, who I call insectulent in this book, which is just a combination of the two words put together with the letter E removed. So the insect-like ones who look like praying mantises, which is the most commonly said description of them, are the ones who I think have engineered this phenomenon and who are calling the shots. They are the ones in control. They do not come down and abduct people, by and large. Gray aliens do, and hybrids do. From the earliest cases that we know of, the Antonio Villas-Boas case in Brazil in 1957, and the Barney and Betty Hill case in 1961, both of those cases had reproductive aspects to them, of all things. I mean, it's the last thing you would expect in an abduction event back in those days. Antonio Villas-Boas was required to have sexual relations with a female who he said looked human, but was part of them in some way. And Barney had sperm taken from him, although he was very careful not to tell that to anybody. And when John Fuller wrote a book about Barney and Betty Hill's experiences, he had Fuller take out that part about taking sperm from him. It was too embarrassing, and he did that and helped everybody, because all guys say that, and in the early days you couldn't accuse them of just getting it from Barney and Betty Hill's story, you know. Mm-hmm. And Betty claimed that they put a needle in her navel, which was true, and then they said it was a pregnancy test, which we have to be dubious about. It's the only time that phrase has ever been uttered that I know of, and that's not good. It probably came from her own thoughts, and she thought that's what they were saying, because there is no such thing as a pregnancy test. But that reproductive quality was there from the very, very beginning. In fact, the Antonio Villas-Boas case was so embarrassing that it wasn't even published in UFO literature until 1966.
That's right. Yeah.
And from the earliest, from the earliest times till now, that reproductive aspect has been there solidly. Mm-hmm. In other words, women have ova taken, men have sperm taken. Women are then sometimes they sometimes have fetuses inserted in them, and then after 10 weeks or so, it's removed, and these fetuses are placed in gestation tanks with nutrients, we assume, and people see them as toddlers, as babies, and as toddlers, as young children, as older children, as adolescents, as young adults, as adults, but not as older adults, for reasons that are unclear, reasons we don't know. And in The Threat, the book that I wrote in 1998, I talked a lot about hybrids, and I sort of bifurcated them into early stage, middle stage, and late stage hybrids, and all that. And I noticed that these gray aliens and hybrids were talking about how soon there was going to be a change. A change was going to come soon. It was going to be wonderful. It was going to be great. Everybody was going to love it, and everybody was going to be happy. And soon this change would come, and everybody's going to be working for the change. And I heard that from a number of people, and which is really an odd thing to say for anybody, even once.
Yeah.
But I heard it from a number of people who are unaware, of course, that other people were saying the same thing. And I asked them how, do they know how long the change will be? Well, what is the word? They would always say it was going to be soon. The aliens always said, soon there's going to be change. Well, what do you mean by soon? Does it mean tomorrow? Does it mean yesterday? Does it mean 5,000 years from now or 1,000,000 years? What does that word mean?
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Mm-hmm. But in 2003, I started working with a guy, and we had several sessions together. This is a man in his 50s, a businessman, and he told me we did a few sessions when he was younger and so forth, and then it occurred to him that he had a friend, and this friend was his best friend, and he did not know his friend's last name, however, nor did he know where his friend came from, nor where he worked, nor whether he was married, or anything about him at all. But he was his best friend, and they were together all the time, which seemed just ever so slightly odd to me.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we did a session on him, who he called Eric.
Could we stop here and take our final break of the hour and return to Eric, because now we're moving to some really important stuff from the standpoint. And we need to obviously also talk a little bit about, you have really analyzed the different types of, so-called different types of aliens, because as you know, there are some people going around saying there are 56 different civilizations that have come here. They said that. I don't know where they got that number from. And this might all be the same civilization. I don't know about that. We're going to take our break here with Dr. David Jacobs, Walking Among Us, the Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books 2015. And wait till you hear about the plan. That's where we're moving to, especially next hour. UFOabduction.com. And as a matter of fact, go to youtube.com, 21st Century Radio, and do this and that and these and those. But sit up straight, comb your hair, and no talking, and you can chew gum. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Hello, this is Ingo Swann, the author of Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy. And you're listening to the wonderful 21st Century Radio with the amazing Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
And I'm having a pretty damn good time. We're about ready to talk about Eric and Dr. David Jacobs' book, Walking Among Us, the Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books 2015, UFOabduction.com. I was very interested in what you said about workers, the Greys being workers, because it reminds me of the way they act like bees. You have workers and you have others that are a bit higher up in rank. Now, tell us a little about good old Eric.
Well, Eric was, the interesting thing about him was that he in the conversations that he had with Bernard, who the person was who I was working with, they were all one-way conversations. Information was given by Bernard about what his life was like, about what to do, about what to eat, how to do this, how to do that, and all sorts of things. And no information was forthcoming from Eric. But Eric was a hybrid. In fact, Eric was a hybrid who could easily live here. In fact, I called those people in the book Hubrids. They are human and hybrid together. Obviously, they're human and hybrid together. They're hybrids. But they are human in every conceivable way except that neurologically they can control people. They can make people do or think or act any way they want, which is the way it's always been from the very beginning of our knowledge of this phenomenon with all gray aliens, with all aliens. And, of course, you can talk telepathically with Bernard at any time and all that. But he was human in every conceivable way. Nobody would ever imagine him being unusual. Mm-hmm. especially in his looks. He looked average. And so they had this whole long relationship. They went fishing. They ate in restaurants. They did sightseeing things. They had this whole long relationship. And I listened to that, and I thought, very interesting. He was still having the relationship, even to the point of leaving Eric 20 minutes before he came to my office for a session where Eric tried his best to get him not to come here. Mm-hmm. But the point is that this is an outlier. Other people have to say the same thing who are unaware of this, as I had heard, and with just one event like this, you have to wait till other people say the same thing before it has any credence to it, or support to it, I should say. Then another person started saying things like that. Then another one. 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 And I began to realize, I think this is the change, or at least I'm seeing indications of the change, or the change is happening. This is the change that they had talked about before. And a woman I had worked with on and off since 1987 began to say things like that. She had never said things like that before, of showing Hubrids, basically, how to drive a car, how to go to a store and buy something, how to go shopping in a supermarket, how to do any number of normal things, normal activities that humans do all the time, from having to take lessons driving cars. Everybody's got to take lessons driving cars, to knowing how to cook an egg, or any number of the most mundane activities you could possibly imagine. And what was happening was these abductees were helping these people, as they told me, learn about American society, and some of them were helping them move into apartments and homes and so forth. And I had never heard this before. This was new. Now, here's the thing about new. New didn't happen in abduction research. You hear it, and then you hear it over and over and over and over and over again, and then there's a fight, and the fight is between you and you, and the fight is over trying to keep awake while a person is talking about their experiences. That's the fight. Mm-hmm. It's a struggle, let me tell you, Dr. Bob. It's a struggle. You've heard things hundreds of times, over and over and over again. It's soporific. It's sleep-inducing. And that soporific quality is what you want, because different people are all saying exactly the same thing for no good reason. It does not give them esteem. It's not going to make them rich. Right. They're not going to be heroes among their friends and family. All it does is make them look totally insane. And the people who have come to me are psychiatrists, psychologists, medical doctors, university professors, attorneys, police officers, you name it. Everybody, people who can't hold a job, people who dropped out of a grammar school in the 12th grade. It's just anybody and everybody. But for high-functioning people who have big-time jobs, they know that by coming to me, they're placing their lives in my hands.
So, Eric,
because if anybody were to find out that they are a psychiatrist who says he's been abducted by little green men from Mars, that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it just might not seem the best thing for their careers as psychiatrists.
It probably isn't. So what you're saying about Eric Eric more or less was being taught to do these things, or actually teaching others to do these things. Is that correct, or I got that backwards?
No, Eric was not teaching anybody. It was Bernard who was teaching Eric everything. He was showing him different foods to eat.
Yeah.
And
so the abductee then becomes the instructor of an alien. And so the alien can learn those things. Well, we're going to cover this more when we get back on 21st Century Radio next hour with Dr. David Jacobs, Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books 2015. Well, this is 21st Century Radio. I'm the alleged Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and I'm twisting the night away every now and then. And our executive producer and researcher assistant, who is my boss, who pushes me around all the time, is Laura Kortner. And there's Noah Dankner, who can bench press over 620 pounds. Now, congratulations, Noah. That is really something. I used to be able to do that in the old days, but somehow I got a lot smaller and weaker. I don't know how that happened. Our guest is Dr. David Jacobs, Ph.D. The book is Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books 2015. Go to UFOabduction.com, and you can also check our growing YouTube channel of selected shows. Of course, it's like a movie, friends. All right, now, this book is, I think, one of the most important books you'll ever read about in dealing with aliens or UFOs. Would you agree to that?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, but how? Well, you're not prejudiced or anything, are you?
No, not a bit.
Oh, that's a good thing you're not. Now, you have categorized the aliens differently than before. How did you categorize them before, and what's this new classification? How did this come about?
Well, what I did is before I talked about different types of hybrids, and the gray aliens are small alien gray aliens, the tall gray aliens. Then there were people saw little babies who looked really alien, but kind of human too a little bit. And I called them early stage hybrids, and then middle stage hybrid looks to half and half, and late stage hybrids, and that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've done now is I have there's more different kinds of hybrids actually. There's and I also tried to address the reptilian-like ones. But with hybrids become more and more human, and there are hybrids who really look human, but they're still hybrids. There's like what I call personal project hybrids who look after an abductee and who deal with an abductee most of their life and have and are human in every way, except that they don't live here. Their range of information about living here is severely limited, and they have tasks to do. Like the security hybrid makes sure that the abductee is not talking about what's going on, is not remembering, is doing what she's supposed to do or what he's supposed to do, and not recalcitrant or anything like that. And there's other forms of hybrids. And the last category, though, are Hubrids. This is just a combination of the words human and hybrid, Hubrid. And these are the ones who are actually moving in. The change is all about moving into the society and living here among us. And Hubrids need to be trained to a degree that is very difficult to imagine. As I mentioned before, they have to learn absolutely everything because there are millions of things to learn, and that's not an exaggeration. There are literally millions of things that humans learn over the course of their lives, many of which are picked up through osmosis just by looking at them when you're a baby. In other words, I haven't ever heard a kid ask me, what is a plate for? And why do you put food on a plate? That's just not a question that Americans are going to ask. It's just not something you're going to hear. But that does happen with Hubrids as they have to learn everything, and it's the abductees who teach them everything that they have to learn, as I mentioned before. Now, for a long, long time, I puzzled over reptilians. And I also puzzled over gray aliens, to tell you the truth. There was something wrong with gray aliens. I could never justify it, which was their mouths.
Mm-hmm.
They don't eat, they don't breathe, they don't have teeth, and they don't talk. Therefore, why do they need a mouth? Why is there a slit for a mouth there? What is that? And then I began to realize that there's a good possibility that these gray aliens were hybridized with DNA from humans.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For some reason or another, and then perhaps cloned later on, since all gray aliens look pretty much alike, and we don't really see them growing wrinkles and having long beards or anything like that. They seem to be ageless almost. But it could be that they're just cloned, and then ones who are getting older are useless, and they discard them in some way. I don't know. But then I got to thinking about, how did this program start? How did it begin? What happened in the very, very, very beginning? And my thought processes were just logical based on my knowledge of the 21st century and my upbringing and the fact that I'm a male and everything else that historians worry about all the time when they think about history. And that is that there had to be some way in which they first identified Earth as a planet to deal with, as a planet to, in some way, hybridize. There had to be a beginning. They had to discover us, find us, have us on a list, whatever it was. Then they had to come here and check us out and make sure that our civilization was compatible with what they wanted, that our intelligence was compatible with what they wanted, that the fact that we were on 2 legs rather than on 6 legs was compatible with what they wanted, et cetera, et cetera. Then they had to make the decision, okay, let's do it. That would have to put into effect a train of events which led to abducting people. I'm not going to go too much into this, but they had to have tables made that fit humans. They had to have everything on board these ships is for abductions. You don't see rec rooms on board a UFO, and there's not Gray standing around telling jokes and punching each other on the shoulder and that sort of stuff. Everything is for abductions. Everything is for humans. Even everything. You just have to take my word for it. There's nothing we see that seems for odd or anything like that. But then they had to start getting humans. Well, insectoids don't come down and get humans. They're up there on board. They're doing their stuff on the UFO. Therefore, they had to have other beings who would be the initial ones who came down and got the ball rolling and started the abduction phenomenon. The physicality of it, of getting humans, bringing them on board, and then bringing them back. And my guess is that those were the reptilians. And the reptilians are probably aliens, or at least hybridized aliens with the insectoids, who knows, but aliens from other planets who have either undergone hybridization or who have just been taken from other planets and are now what would be workers or prisoners or who knows what word goes in there. They're the ones who went down and started getting people. That's when the gray aliens evolved, and then they began to start getting people. That population increased dramatically, and that kicks off, that kickstarts the abduction phenomenon. And that's why you see reptilians on board some objects. Now, here's something that people are going to become inflamed about when I say this. Describing reptile-like ones, reptilians, as I call them in the book, is unusual. It's not often. It happens once in a while. I've got a bunch of reports of reptilian types or reptilians, but it is not overwhelmingly large. It's small. It's certainly much, much, much smaller than just gray aliens. And even though when you look on the internet, it's all reptilian all the time. It seems.
That's right. Yeah, sure.
And I don't fully understand that. It's not what I hear. It happens, and they're there. But I think they were the original kidnappers, so to speak, the original abductors, because the insect-like ones don't do it. And after that, their jobs were taken over by the gray aliens. And when I ask people, people say, oh, this guy's a reptilian. Oh, I hate him. Oh, he's disgusting. I hate him. I say, well, is he being aggressive to you? No, but I just hate him, and he's coming at me. Oh, he's disgusting. And I say, well, is he harming you? Is he hurting you in any way? No. Well, what is he doing? What's he doing? Well, he's doing and then they recount basically the standard stuff that everybody else does, but they just hate him. Mm-hmm. He gives off this aura of threat in some way or another.
Might that also be in part because of the extremist fundamentalists who see these reptilians as Satan?
Well, maybe it's possible, I guess, but they're just part of the work group.
Sure. Yeah.
They're in the spectrum of the workers. They're not the ones in charge. They've got people above them, and so now I must say that I've worked with 5 people who were ministers, and none of them. Well, with one I worked with for a very long time. With another one I worked with just a few times, and with a couple of others. Well, no, none of them thought that these had anything to do with religion or with demons or with angels or anything like that. Although they, I'm sure that they were prone to doing that, but they recognized that this was something different. This is what I call planetary acquisition. This is something that is that we're involved with the takeover. If you want to call it an invasion, there was a woman named Ellen Crystal, the late Ellen Crystal, wrote a book about UFOs called Silent Invasion.
That's right. I remember that one.
Yeah, and I always liked that title because it fits perfectly what's going on now. It's a silent invasion. I don't know what the future holds, but I just can't imagine it as being good for us. Maybe my imagination isn't wide enough, but from what I know about these beings, they do what they want to do, and human beings have no control over them. They can control us, and we can't control them. And the problem is that makes us a second-class species as opposed to a first-class species, and that's exactly the wrong way it should be. We should be the first-class species, and they should be the second-class species. But that's not the way things appear to be working out.
Tell us a little bit more about their emotions, how they view things in regards to humans.
Well, you mean Hubrids or?
Well, let's say. I'm just looking. Certainly, you can say Hubrids, but I'm also just thinking about the emotional factors in regards to how they express themselves.
Right. Well, they are humans. They are humans in every way except that they can control us and we can't control them. The problem is they were born on board a UFO. They do not have human experiences. They do not have parents that they know of. I mean, they obviously have a mother and a father through sperm and egg, but there's no knowledge of that. they don't have siblings that they know of. When they're taken out of the incubator tanks, when they're babies, they don't keep track of days and dates. That's not a concept. They've never had a birthday in their lives. They've never had a birthday party. They've never had presents. There's no humor on board. They can't recognize humor. Sometimes they'll laugh, but they'll laugh at, this is Hubrids now, they'll laugh at somebody doing something silly, but irony or jokes, things like that you say, they just draw a straight blank from. Most of them have never heard music. They don't know what music is. There's no dance, there's no art, there's no theater, there's no entertainment of the sort of that we thrive on. Mm-hmm. They've never seen television before. These are the Hubrids now, not other hybrids who come down to pick people up and they'll see a television on and that sort of stuff. But they've never listened to the radio. They don't know what CDs are or MP3s or whatever. The amount of stuff that they don't know as they're moving into the society is just mind-boggling. It's jaw-dropping. They know a tremendous amount about living here, but that tremendous amount is on about a 3-year-old's level. And a 3-year-old knows a huge amount. So you know what I mean? They have to learn everything. Now,
we have another break coming up there, David. So, in other words, the aliens do not have a lot of, they are not emotional beings. Is that correct?
Not gray aliens. They have very little emotions whatsoever. But Hubrids do have emotions.
Yeah, that's the point I was moving to.
Kind of, a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take
they're dormant.
Let's take a break here because we're moving towards the idea as to what's really going on from the standpoint that maybe we were always told decades ago that if there was this abduction process, that all it was about is they were studying us to find certain things out. And it appears maybe those things that they had to find out was whether or not we could work with, or they could work with us or control us. But it certainly wasn't just they're studying as to how our stomach works or that type of thing. Is that correct, sir?
Absolutely correct.
All right. We'll be back with our guest, Dr. David Jacobs, Ph.D., Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books, 2015. Go to ufoabduction.com.
Hi, this is Bud Hopkins, a UFO investigator, writer, and artist, and you're listening to Dr. Bob Hieronimus, 21st Century Radio, and I'm very pleased to be a guest here.
We're moving towards a point that I think is going to disappoint a lot of people that feel so strongly about good aliens and the possibility that maybe we're being basically used. You've probably done a lot of interviews on this book, right?
Yes, I have. I've done quite a bit.
Have you been asked by some of those people that have interviewed you about where the good aliens are, or are there good aliens?
So far, I have not been asked that, and I'm pleased to say. I mean, maybe there are good aliens around, but they're not abducting people, as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. And but being a good alien and being secretive and abducting people over the course of their lives by the millions, literally, because this is a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's just there's no evidence for it that I can find. Nobody's ever told me anything like that in all the years I've been doing this. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, but listen, if there are good aliens out there and they come here and to help us, that's fine. I can live with that.
Yeah, I can live with that too. You know, maybe we could hire them or something.
Right.
Because I know they're out to make as much money as they possibly can. I'm sure they need it. Just like everybody else here. Well, I didn't want to get into that too deeply, but I know that they're many friends of mine who are not going to be happy with the possibility that aliens, this particular group, because they like to think that there really are 57, 58 different types of aliens, and they all come from different parts of the universe, multiverse, wherever. And it didn't necessarily seem that way to me, but that's something else.
Well, I remember there was a conference held at MIT back in 1992, and Jim Harder, who was a professor of engineering at Cal Berkeley, got up in the audience and said that, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like there are 249 different aliens coming to Earth.
Wow.
And the origin of that is improper. There's two origins of it. The first is when people who are abducted remember things consciously, most people assume conscious memories are where it's at. That's the gold standard of memories, conscious memories. Actually, the reverse is the most important thing. They are notoriously inaccurate. And it's even though you'd think it goes against the grain to think that way, but I have learned through the hard way that when people remember things, they're usually wrong, not about everything, but about most things. And when you begin to take a look at what exactly are they wrong about, the two leaders, the two highest forms of confabulation of being wrong are, number one, description of aliens, just like that, description of aliens, and number two, recounting alien dialogue. So if you say this handsome green alien with antenna sticking out of his ears told me that they come in peace, whatever, you're confabulating in two areas right off, and so the problem is that there's no standardization of procedures for hypnosis. And that's the next book I'm going to write. Is going to be about how to do hypnosis with abductees. I'm going to try to standardize the field, even though there are people who think that this is a wonderful, good, happy phenomenon. I'm certain hate my guts, but I hope it will standardize the field anyway, because it's going to be based on simple logic. And I'm going to be chronological and logical all the way through this How to Do Hypnosis book, so that people will ask the right questions and be aware of when somebody else is confabulating. And the problem is that oftentimes people can confabulate in the ways that hypnotists want them to confabulate. They do put things in their minds. They do ask questions that call for this kind of wonderful, nice sweetness that these angelic beings are bringing us. And I never hear that. I just never hear it. It just never comes up. And you know that it's a problem of questioning. And so when somebody says there's 56 aliens, they may fully believe it. They may not be lying, but they might also just be searching their own memories for what aliens look like, or else have an incompetent researcher who's doing it with them.
Well, you say that there is a bureaucracy involved with settling Hubrids on Earth. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, there has to be advanced people. There has to be somebody who comes down and makes sure that the area in which a Hubrid or some Hubrids will be moving into is the correct area. Now, how they would know the correct area, I don't know. But my guess is that it has to be around some stores that are open all night long, that it has to be in they don't know safe or unsafe. They don't know crime or not crime. They fear violence, but it's hard for them to determine which area is a good area or a lesser area. But they figure something out for where they would be moving into. And those are the advanced people. Then there's independent Hubrids who come down and live alone in an apartment. They have to know where to go. They have to they have to know which apartment it is. They can't walk into somebody's apartment and say, hey, you get the hell out. They can't do that. It's got to be prepared for them in the beginning. Then there are these security hybrids who protect them, who make sure that no harm comes to them, especially from the abductees that they'll be working with. Most Hubrids have various different abductees that they go to. I was with one who went to other abductees, but whose main purpose, whose mainstay was the one I was working with. At the same time, there's also the personal project hybrid who has known the abductee from the time he or she was a child and stuck with that abductee. Usually it's a female abductee. And he has the responsibility of making sure that she stays in line and doesn't tell anybody. Now, with Betsy in the book, she did tell people. She told me. And they tried everything they could to get her to stop. And eventually, they have a certain amount of violence that they use too. It's very odd violence, but it's violence nonetheless that they use. And they couldn't get her to stop. What happens then is they send her up to gray aliens or even insectoids who tell them that they can't be doing what they're doing. They've got to be part of this group. It's for the best, and scrape them over the coals a little bit, and not physically, but try to make sure that they will remain in the aliens' camp at all times, so to speak. They're not running loose somewhere or anything. But this bureaucracy is around them all the time. Now, I shouldn't say all the time, but a lot of the time. They spend a lot of time together. The security hybrid will also bring down young kids to look at people's apartments, to look at what's in an apartment. One of my favorite stories in this book, and there's about 4 billion stories, but one of my favorite ones is a caretaker who's just a caretaker. He looks human, but his job is just to take care of these Hubrids who will be moving here. Comes down with a kid and to Betsy's house, and she shows the kid the kitchen and this and that. And they come into the living room, and the caretaker guy, the hybrid, sits on a couch, and Betsy sits on the couch, and the kid sits on an upholstered chair. Except he's sitting in an odd way. He's sitting without his back touching the back. He's sitting sort of straight up, not leaning back. And the caretaker says to him, "Lean back. What's the matter with you, basically? Lean back." No, the kid doesn't want to lean back. The kid starts making excuses. He won't lean back. At which point Betsy realizes what's going on here. He's afraid that if he leans back, because it's soft, he's going to fall through and maybe land on his back on the floor. So she tells him, "No, it's okay. You can lean back. There's wood inside the material there, inside the padding, and you won't hurt yourself. It'll be okay." I'm getting this a tiny bit wrong here. So he gets up and he walks around and he feels the back of the chair and he says, "Oh yeah, oh okay, oh," and he comes and he sits back in the chair and he slowly pushes himself back, and he gingerly sort of leans back, and he's sitting in an upholstered chair. And I listened to this account, and knowing that there's no such thing as upholstered chairs on UFOs, and this is the first time the kid has ever sat in one, who would invent a story like that? How can you even think of a story like that? It's so mundane. It's so off the wall, so to speak. It's so bizarre in its in its simpleness, in its mundaneness, in its everyday quality that it would never occur to most Americans that they to be frightened of an upholstered chair. And yet this is what happens is Betsy is part of the bureaucracy. She's teaching this young kid who will not be moving in until he's at least 17 or so, but she's helping to train him, as she does on board as well, as do other abductees, on the processes of living here and trying to teach him how to sit in a chair.
So all of this is done in total secrecy, right? The aliens don't want any of this known, right?
That is correct.
So
without secrecy, there'd be no program. Without this clandestine nature, we'd know about it. We would have extremely intelligent people, I would hope, putting their minds together collectively around the world, because this is a global phenomenon, trying to either protect abductees if they know who they are, or stop the phenomenon, or both. They would understand that this is an enormous existential threat to humanity, period.
Yes, it is.
This is not just immigrants coming into the society. This is an existential threat to humanity. It threatens our very existence.
So the idea of some UFO researchers hoping and thinking that eventually the aliens themselves will break the secrecy and reveal what they're doing. Well, if they do that, obviously, if they would do that, they would probably be near the end of what's called the change.
There's no reason to ever do it. They all know themselves what they're doing. Eventually, if they overtake humanity through birth, if they become dominant in this society, they still don't have to do it. They can just. There's no reason to ever not be secret. But if somebody finds out about it and it's secret, it's not going to matter much at that time. Mm-hmm. That will be, I hope, long after I'm in one of the two places I'm supposed to go when I die.
Well, you may end up going to both of those places, the way things are going these days. But we're going to take our final break of this hour, and we need to talk a little bit more about what that program is, why the aliens are doing it, and if this is happening, can anything be done about it? Can you answer those questions for us when we come back?
Well, if the fee is correct,
I'll give you $1,500. Is that going to handle it?
Yes, it's a deal.
Okay. All right. See you back there. Okay. But you'll get a check. It won't be cash. All right. Our guest is Dr. David Jacob, Ph.D.
This is Dr. John Mack, author of Passport to the Cosmos, Human Transformation and Alien Encounters. You are listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
All right. Now, talk to us about if this program that you have outlined is happening, what the point of it is, and why are they doing it, and is it possible to get out of it somehow? Maybe if we gave them about $10 million, we'd be able to get out of it, but I don't know. I think they could create their own money, though.
Well, yeah, and you bring up some really interesting questions, and they're interesting for a lack of knowledge. We don't know why this is happening. We don't know why these insectolins and the whole crew, so to speak, is doing what they're doing. I mean, other than transporting people to live here, Hubrids, but we don't know why. We don't know what the future brings. We don't know what's in their minds. Now, here's the deal. With the abduction phenomenon, it's either psychological or it's real. There's nothing in the middle. It's just something the brain cooked up through fetid imaginations, or it's happening. With UFOs, there's lots in the middle. You can see UFO up in the sky, and you can investigate it, and it's not a UFO, it's something else. You see UFO up there, and it is a UFO, And there's this middle ground where sometimes you're mistaken, but you did see something and all that. And with UFOs, the amount of evidence is overwhelming. overwhelming. It's mind-boggling. Every conceivable kind of evidence, now people will dispute this, except having one, is available to UFO researchers. In other words, there's photographs and tapes and movies and marks on the ground and every conceivable kind of evidence one would like to have, except for physical evidence. We have tremendous amounts of it. I mean, it's mind-boggling. With abductions, it's either psychological or it's not, or it's happening. One of the two. There's nothing in the middle. Now, if this were psychological, we know why they were doing it. Because if they're making everything up, they would make that up too. Maybe not everybody, but maybe most people would. Because they want to improve relations to give us relations with the community of planets. Because they want to come here because we're despoiling our environment, and they want to help us, and it's all going to be wonderful when they show us how to do it later on. Whatever, we'd have lots of different explanations for it, but we don't. We don't know. All we know is that they're doing it. The insectolins are the ones in control, and they don't tell others. When people have asked the Hubrids, why are you doing this? They say, this is our task. Our task is to live here. They don't know anything else. All I know is that they're supposed to live here, and that's what they do, because they're not quite human. You see what I mean? They obey orders without question. There's no doubt about it. So we don't know, and once again, it's as simple as being abducted. If people were making this up, I remember thinking years and years ago that they're telling me they're in their room, and suddenly there's a light in the room, and now they're moving towards the light, and now they're going right through the window, right through through the slide up into a UFO. And I say, wait a second, hold on for a second, let me back you up. When you get to the window, do you open the window? And they say, no, I don't open the window. I say, well, when you get to the window, do the aliens open the window? No, they don't do that either. I say, well, when you get to the window, does it open by itself in some way? Psychokinesis, whatever. And they say, no. They say, I just think I'm floating right through the closed window. Now, here's the thing. There is no reason whatsoever, if they are making this up, that they would say, I'm going through the closed window. It's a barrier to belief. If they say, of course I open the window, then everything is fine. Everything is smooth. Yes, everything makes sense. But none of them say that. They always say, I'm going right through the closed window. I've heard this hundreds of times, and people will look at me and say, has anybody else ever reported that? It's the same way with knowing what's going on. Hubrids and hybrids and everybody else really don't say why they're doing this, so we don't know, and abductees don't make it up.
Well, what kind of society would we experience if the aliens did succeed, if this is what they were headed towards?
Well, once again, we'd be a second-class species. I do not know if humans in the way we are now would exist very much longer, to tell you the truth. I really do think that this is an existential threat, that eventually they'd all become hybrids rather, in some way, because of marrying in. But I fear the worst. We're dealing with an enormously advanced technological society, if I can use this phenomenon as a society. And not only that, my guess is that they have done this before, that this is not new to them, that this is not something that they're trying out, that this is kind of standard fare in some way. So none of this gladdens my heart. I look at the future, and of course historians cannot tell the future. You learn that in the first day in history school, so to speak. And You can't tell the future, and I can't tell the future, and it's all telling of the future is guesswork. But this gives me a real fear for the future of us as humans. I really do. I hate to say it that way. I never in my life imagined I would be saying words like this or talking like this. Never, ever, ever.
Well, I feel pretty much the same way along these lines. I'm much less educated in this area, but I feel the same way from the standpoint, the kind of society that we would be living in, since they can read, they're telepathic, so they can read us after we think something, and they know what we're ready to do. I don't know what kind of defense we can have against something like this. Do you?
No, but there's a guy named Mike Minkin who makes sort of helmets and hats for people who are abductees who say that abductions have been prevented and all that, and he may be on the right path, but he's not a scientist, and scientists couldn't care less about this subject. There's a few, who are interested in it on the side, but they know that to show any interest in it whatsoever is curtains for them. It's disastrous. I was at Temple from 1975 to 2011, Temple University when I retired. Not a single person from the sciences, from the science departments, chemistry and physics and astronomy, whatever it is, not a single person in all those years ever came up to me and asked me what the heck I was doing and why was I doing this and what's your nothing. Never ever asked me that. And I had more publicity at Temple University than any other faculty member outside of the sports department and the sports program, I should say. And I was in the newspapers and all the time. Not a single scientist. Now, having said that about scientists, 2 people from the rest of the university, a guy who was a professor of philosophy and a friend of mine in the history department, asked me about the UFO and abduction phenomenon. Only 2 in my own department.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this is pretty reflective of the scientific community as a whole. And so we don't know whether this thing can be stopped. Of course, it is global, but we don't know whether we can in some way impede it without intelligent people taking a serious look at this and acting. And from what I can tell right now, that's just not going to happen.
Well, what about the possibility of Mother Nature? Because obviously we're going through some environmental changes, some really serious ones. Do you think that could affect these aliens in a negative way?
Well, you mean it might bring them down faster to stop it in some way or something like that?
Well, yeah. Is that possible?
It beats me. I don't know.
I mean, they have such high technology, it would seem that they could escape from any physical third-dimensional serious problem.
Yeah, we would think, but, I don't know if they know about the problems of Earth. I don't think they watch the news. I don't think that they know who anybody is. Most of them don't know that they're coming down to the country that they'll be living in is Pakistan, let's just say, or the United States or Canada or Latin America or whatever. They don't know that there's a president of the United States. They have to learn how to eat with a fork.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's their knowledge of the society is limited, to say the least. But eventually they'll learn. They are tremendous learners. They remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first started out with this, Bob, I was thrilled to death. I thought that UFOs back when I was in 1966, whatever, that this might be contact with other planets and there'd be a meeting of the minds and landing on a White House lawn and exchange of gifts and we'd be a community of planets and all that sort of nonsense. But I that's what I was involved with, and I thought, oh, that's wonderful, it's thrilling, it's exciting. And I sort of kept that way, wondering why the UFOs didn't land and all that until I got involved with abductions.
We got to stop right now. I am so sorry, Doctor. We needed 4 more hours on this book. Dr. David Jacobs, Ph.D., Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, Disinformation Books, 2015. And that's the end of the hour. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronimus and Company. Our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner. I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and remember, shine your shoes and get a haircut.